The room was thick with tension as Samantha Taylor, the protective mother, stood face to face with Grace, her son's fiancée. The silence between them spoke volumes. Unresolved questions, hidden secrets, and a mother's desperation to protect her child. "I know exactly what you're hiding, Grace," Samantha said coldly, her voice laced with authority. "And if you marry my son, you'll destroy everything." Grace's eyes widened, her composure faltering for the first time. The woman she had once admired, her future mother-in-law, was now a force she couldn't ignore. What had Samantha discovered? And why was she so certain that Grace's presence in the family would tear it apart? But before we unravel the full story, welcome to Stories with Mr. Gray. If you love uncovering the truth and standing up for justice, hit subscribe and drop the flag of your country in the comments below. As the room quieted, the weight of the moment settled in. Samantha Taylor, a woman of grace and strength, had spent her life ensuring that her son, Devon, would never lack anything. She built her career from the ground up, balancing her role as a successful businesswoman with being a devoted mother. But no success, no amount of wealth or power, could have prepared her for the storm brewing within her family. Devon Taylor, her only child, was a force in his own right. At 36 years old, he had turned Taylor Enterprises into one of the most successful tech firms in the country. Brilliant, driven, and respected, he had everything a man could want, except for a deep sense of trust in the woman he was about to marry. He thought he knew Grace, the woman who had stood by him through the challenges of his rising career. But as his mother stood before him, demanding his attention, Devon had no idea that everything he thought he knew was about to be called into question. Grace, the fiancée, was everything Devon thought he wanted. Beautiful, poised, and well-connected, she seemed perfect on the outside. She quickly became the darling of social circles, charming everyone she met. But behind the smile and the perfect facade, something about Grace didn't sit right with Samantha. Her instincts told her that something was off. There were inconsistencies in Grace's past that Devon hadn't picked up on. Samantha's protective nature kicked into overdrive. She couldn't risk letting her son make a life-altering decision without knowing the truth. For Samantha, it wasn't just about a daughter-in-law, it was about the future of her family. And she would do anything to protect Devon, even if it meant confronting Grace with a secret that could tear them all apart. Samantha Taylor had always trusted her instincts. They had guided her well throughout her life, whether in business or personal matters. But right now, those instincts were screaming at her. Her son, Devon, was about to marry Grace, a woman he believed to be perfect for him. But something about Grace wasn't right. Samantha couldn't quite put her finger on it, but every time she saw the couple together, a deep unease settled in her chest. It wasn't anything overt. Grace wasn't rude or deceitful in an obvious way. She was charming, even likable, at least to Devon and their social circle. But Samantha had noticed things that others hadn't, small things that didn't add up. Grace's perfection, the way she always seemed a little too polished, too rehearsed, was the first red flag. There were the little shifts in Grace's behavior when she thought no one was watching. Once, during a family dinner, Samantha noticed Grace's smile faltering when Devon's attention was momentarily diverted. It wasn't a big thing, but the shift was enough to make Samantha wonder, why the sudden change? Another incident occurred at one of the couple's parties, when Grace casually mentioned how lucky Devon was to have such a successful mother. But Samantha noticed the way Grace's eyes lingered just a little too long on her, almost like she was measuring her up, calculating something. The kind of look one might give to someone they saw as an obstacle or a stepping stone. But what really set Samantha's alarm bells ringing was Grace's repeated references to our future, always phrased in terms of control, rather than partnership. At a dinner, when they were discussing the wedding, Grace had casually said, "Of course, once we're married, Devon will be running the company, but I'll be making sure things run smoothly in the background." Samantha's heart sank at the implications. Was this about love? Or was Grace positioning herself for something more? She also overheard Grace on the phone one night when she thought no one was around. Samantha didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the words stuck with her. Grace was speaking to someone in a calm, almost calculating tone. "I just need to keep him happy for a few more months," Grace said. "Once the wedding's over, we'll have all the control." That was the moment Samantha knew something was wrong. She wasn't sure what Grace's game was, but it wasn't just about marrying Devon. There was something hidden beneath the surface, a hidden agenda that could destroy everything Devon had worked for. As days passed, Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that Grace wasn't who she appeared to be. Her concerns weren't just paranoia, they were based on pieces of a puzzle that, when put together, painted a disturbing picture. Samantha had always believed that trust was earned, not given blindly. And right now, she needed proof, undeniable evidence that Grace wasn't who she claimed to be. If she was going to confront Devon, she needed something solid, something he couldn't dismiss as mere motherly paranoia. She started where any concerned mother would, quietly, subtly, without raising suspicion. Her first step was reaching out to mutual acquaintances, people who had known Grace before she entered Devon's life. She wasn't looking for gossip. She needed facts. One of her first calls was to an old friend of hers, Martha, a socialite well-connected in high society. "Oh, Grace Montgomery?" Martha mused over the phone. "Yes, I remember her. She was engaged to a financier a few years ago. Quite the scandal when that ended." Samantha's breath hitched. Grace had been engaged before? Devon had never mentioned it. "Scandal?" she pressed. "Yes," Martha said with an airy chuckle. "From what I recall, her ex-fiancé called off the wedding just weeks before the ceremony. Something about her being too ambitious and hiding things from him. There were rumors about money disappearing, investments going wrong, but nothing was ever confirmed." Samantha's grip on the phone tightened. This was exactly what she feared. Grace had a history of broken engagements and whispers of financial schemes. But she needed more. Determined to dig deeper, Samantha decided to look into Grace's past financial dealings. A discreet inquiry with a private investigator revealed troubling news. Grace had been involved in multiple failed business ventures, all of which had mysteriously folded after securing large investments. The troubling part? In each case, she had walked away with a significant payout, while the investors lost everything. But that wasn't all. The investigator found records of Grace using different variations of her name in business dealings. It was a classic tactic used by those trying to avoid scrutiny. The deeper Samantha looked, the more she realized that Grace was not just ambitious. She was strategic, calculated, and possibly dangerous. Then came the most disturbing revelation yet. Grace had been in contact with a well-known corporate lawyer, one who specialized in handling discreet financial arrangements before high-profile marriages. The documents Samantha received detailed plans for a quiet transfer of assets, meaning that once married, Grace would legally gain access to Devon's wealth and could move money under her own name with little restriction. Samantha's stomach turned. This wasn't love. This was a setup. Armed with the truth, Samantha knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. She arranged to meet Grace for coffee the next afternoon. If there was any doubt in her mind before, the look on Grace's face when she arrived erased it completely. The woman who always carried herself with grace and composure suddenly looked uneasy. "This is a surprise," Grace said with a tight smile, sliding into the seat opposite Samantha. Samantha didn't waste time with pleasantries. She placed a neatly folded piece of paper on the table, the background report on Grace's failed businesses and hidden financial dealings. Grace's expression remained unreadable, but Samantha caught the slight clench of her jaw. "You've been busy," Grace murmured, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the paper without opening it. "Not as busy as you," Samantha shot back, keeping her voice even. "You've got quite the track record, don't you? Failed businesses, broken engagements, and a habit of walking away just before everything collapses." For the first time, Grace's mask cracked. Her smile faded, and for a fleeting second, something colder, sharper, flashed in her eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by an amused chuckle. "I don't know what you think you've found, Mrs. Taylor, but you have quite the imagination," Grace said smoothly. "Devon and I are in love. That's all that matters." Samantha leaned forward. "Love doesn't come with prearranged asset transfers. Love doesn't leave behind a trail of ruined investors and mysteriously vanished funds. You don't love my son, Grace. You see him as your next financial opportunity." Grace's expression darkened. For the first time, she had nothing to say. Samantha exhaled. "I know what you're up to, and I promise you, Grace, you won't get away with it." Unbeknownst to both of them, Devon had just walked into the cafe and overheard every word. Devon stood frozen just a few feet away. He had stepped into the cafe expecting to surprise his mother, maybe steal a few minutes away from work before the chaos of the wedding. But instead, he walked into a conversation that threatened to unravel everything he believed about the woman he was about to marry. His heart pounded as his mother's words echoed in his head. "You don't love my son, Grace. You see him as your next financial opportunity." For a moment, Devon hoped he had misheard, that there was some misunderstanding. But the look on Grace's face, the cold calculation in her eyes, sent a chill down his spine. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't offended. She wasn't even trying to deny it. She was just watching his mother, measuring her next move. Samantha sensed his presence before she turned around. She met Devon's gaze, and for the first time, he saw something in his mother's eyes that scared him. Certainty. She wasn't guessing. She knew something about Grace, and it wasn't good. "Devon," she said softly, cautiously. "Sit down." Grace recovered quickly, slipping into the role of the wounded fiancée in an instant. "Devon, baby, your mom has this idea in her head. She's been against me from the beginning." Grace's voice broke as she reached for his hand. "I don't know what she thinks she's found, but you know me. You know us. This is crazy." Devon hesitated. He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. But something about the way she spoke, the desperation, the performance, it felt off. He looked at his mother. "Mom, what's going on?" His voice was quiet, but the weight of it filled the space between them. Samantha exhaled, pushing the papers toward him. "I didn't want to do this, Devon, but I had to. I couldn't sit back and watch you walk into something dangerous." Devon picked up the documents. His eyes skimmed over the failed business ventures, the hidden financial transfers, the past engagement that ended in scandal. Every piece of evidence painted a different picture of the woman he loved, a picture he hadn't seen before. "Grace," he whispered, his throat dry. "What is this?" Grace didn't even look at the papers. Instead, she scoffed and leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "It's nothing, Devon. A few bad investments, a couple of exes with grudges, everyone has a past. And let's be honest, your mom would have found something to make me look bad. She never wanted us together." Samantha's voice was firm. "I didn't go looking for anything, Grace. I only followed the trail you left behind." The words hung in the air like a blade waiting to drop. Devon looked between the two women. His mind was at war with itself. On one side, there was Grace, the woman who had made him feel alive, who had stood beside him for over a year, who had convinced him that their love was real. On the other, there was his mother, the one person who had never, ever lied to him. "Tell me the truth," Devon finally said, his voice shaking. "Did you plan all of this? Was this about my money?" For the first time, Grace didn't answer immediately. That was all Samantha needed to see. "You don't even have to say it," Samantha murmured. "Your silence is enough." Grace's mask slipped. "Just a little, but enough. You think you're so smart, don't you?" Grace muttered, her voice dropping to something colder. "So what if I wanted security? So what if I didn't grow up with money like you did? Do you have any idea what it's like to build a life from nothing? To know that at any moment it can all be taken away?" Devon's stomach dropped. This wasn't about love. It never had been. Grace, did you even love me? His voice cracked, the pain unmistakable. Grace hesitated for a beat too long. Then she sighed, rolling her eyes slightly as if the entire thing was an inconvenience. Devon, she said, her voice suddenly softer, more calculated. I love the life we were going to build together. Doesn't that count for something? Something inside Devon shattered. No, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It doesn't. Grace knew she had lost. There was no more charm, no more performance. She grabbed her purse and stood abruptly, flipping her hair over her shoulder. Fine, she snapped. You know what? Maybe I was looking out for myself. Maybe I was smart enough to secure my future. But do you really think any of your rich friends would have married for love? Devon? You're naive. Get out, Devon said, his voice quiet but firm. Grace scoffed. Your loss. And with that, she walked out, leaving behind the shattered pieces of a future that had never been real to begin with. Silence filled the cafe. Samantha placed a gentle hand on her son's shoulder, but he didn't move. He just stared at the table, at the truth in front of him. He had almost walked into the biggest mistake of his life. And if not for his mother, he would have never seen it coming. I'm sorry, he whispered, not even sure who he was apologizing to. His mother, himself, or the part of him that had believed in something that was never real. Samantha squeezed his hand. You have nothing to be sorry for. Devon let out a long breath. I almost married her, Mom. But you didn't, Samantha said softly. That's what matters. And for the first time in weeks, Devon finally saw things clearly. Devon sat in his mother's living room, staring blankly at the untouched glass of whiskey in his hand. The past 24 hours had felt like a blur. The wedding was officially called off. The venue was canceled, the invitations were scrapped, and Grace was gone, just like that. But the weight in his chest remained. You don't have to say anything, son, Samantha said gently as she sat beside him. I know this hurts. Devon let out a hollow chuckle. Hurts? He swirled the whiskey in his glass, shaking his head. I almost gave my life to someone who didn't even love me. Someone who saw me as a stepping stone. You loved her, Samantha said. That was real for you, and that's what makes it hurt the most. Devon sighed, leaning back against the couch. You saw it before I did. I should have listened to you sooner. Samantha shook her head.
No, Devon.
You had to see it for yourself. No amount of warnings could have convinced you until you were ready to see the truth. That's just how love works. Devon ran a hand down his face, his voice quieter now. I keep wondering, was anything real? Was there ever a moment where she actually cared about me? Or was it all just an act? Samantha exhaled. That's something only Grace can answer. But the more important question is, where do you go from here? Devon looked at her, exhaustion in his eyes. I don't know. Samantha gave him a small smile, reaching for his hand. You start by remembering who you are. You are not just a successful CEO. You are a man who built his empire from the ground up. You are smart, kind, and strong. And just because one person tried to take advantage of that, doesn't mean love isn't real. It just means you haven't found the right person yet. That night, Devon found himself in his study, scrolling through old photos on his phone. Memories of his time with Grace. Their vacations, their celebrations, the laughter they shared. He stared at them, searching for something real, something that made sense. But now, with everything his mother had uncovered, all he saw were shadows. Moments that were never as genuine as he had once believed. He exhaled deeply and closed the gallery. Then, he did something he should have done long ago. He deleted them. All of them. Every message, every photo, every reminder of the woman who had almost fooled him. Almost. For the first time, Devon felt lighter. He leaned back in his chair, looking out the window. The city skyline stretched before him, glittering with opportunity. Life would go on, and so would he. The next morning, Devon met Samantha for breakfast at a quiet cafe. The weight on his shoulders wasn't completely gone, but something had shifted. He was no longer drowning in what could have been. He was beginning to move forward. "So," Samantha said as she sipped her coffee, "I have to ask, are you taking a break from dating, or should I start sending resumes?" Devon nearly choked on his coffee, laughing for the first time in days. "Mom, please, let me breathe." Samantha smirked. "I'm just saying, if you need someone properly vetted, I'm available." "I think I'll handle that part on my own," Devon said with a chuckle. Then he looked at her, sincerity in his eyes. "Thank you, Mom, for everything. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't stepped in." Samantha reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You would have figured it out eventually. But sometimes, a mother's love means seeing the truth before you're ready to accept it." "Well," Devon exhaled, "next time I'm in love, I promise to listen a little sooner." Samantha smiled. "That's all I ask. Love can blind us, even the strongest of us. But real love is never about control, never about manipulation, and never about what someone stands to gain. It's about trust, honesty, and seeing someone for who they truly are." What would you have done if you were in Devon's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. And if you believe in truth, family, and the power of intuition, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the story with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, stay true to yourself.